Hi, I'm Dr. Bahby Banks with Pilar Consulting, and welcome to Black Wall Street's VibeCheck. This program is developed by Duke Health and Complex Creative to spotlight conversations around the pandemic, vaccines, and everything in between. So we brought a subject matter expert with us today to really help talk about and to dispel some of the myths around the ever-evolving COVID-19 pandemic. So this is called VibeCheck. Let's start there. Number one, can you tell us who you are? Tell us what you're studying here at school, and then just tell us, we're checking in, how are you doing? And then we'll end with our expert.
My name is Keara Garrett. I'm a senior elementary education major here at North Carolina Central University, and I'm doing well. Life is great, health is great, so I can't complain.
And I am Derrick Stanfield. I'm a history and political science student here at North Carolina Central, and I also have the privilege of serving as our student body president. Great weather, a lot better than I thought it would be today, so that's well. And then we just got through our midterm, so I'm feeling great.
Fall breezes, and you're past your exams. All right, I feel you, I hear you. And our expert today, we have a psychologist joining us. Can you please tell us who you are and tell us a little bit about yourself?
Sure. My name is Dr. Keisha O'Garo. I'm a pain psychologist, actually, at Duke University Medical Center. And I specify in trauma, military, PTSD, cultural diversity, along with chronic pain and other medical illnesses.
Wow. Before we jump into the conversation, how has your work changed in the midst of COVID-19?
It has changed a lot. We went from seeing people in person to telework. Within a matter of days, actually, and I'm still teleworking. A variety of my patients have been with me for a very long time, but now I'm finding that there's also a slew of patients that are having a difficult time getting in because of how booked we are.
Wow. We say we're going to be all right, but are we really? And really owning sometimes that we're not doing well, and that's okay to reach out to a professional.
Sure.
Thank you for sharing that. So we've had unique conversations as Black people, let's be honest, around vaccinations, given some of the generational trauma that we know our communities have experienced, a lack of trust around public health, around research, and it influences not only all decisions, but really also how we engage with vaccine decisions. So talk about some of the things young people are talking about with the vaccines. What are they saying, given some of the things that we know have existed for us? Historically and contemporarily today?
For starters, a lot of students are really adamant about getting vaccinated just because of like everything they see on social media and like in the blogs. So they're like, okay, why would I get this if I don't even know if it's really going to save me or, support me from getting this virus. So that's one thing that I hear a lot.
So for us, for we folk who are not as savvy with social media, what are the things that young people are seeing on social media? The old folks are still on Facebook. We know y'all are everywhere else. What are you seeing, or what are some of your peers seeing?
A lot of things that I'm seeing on social media is, it's got a magnet. You'll have a magnet in your arm. You'll get sick as soon as you get vaccinated, or it's a government-made thing. So that's one of the main things. I just think it's crazy.
I think old folks are talking about that too. Derrick, please.
I can add on to that. A lot of the experience that we've had, especially as like student government looking to encourage the vaccine, I've had conversations with students just like, between me and you, right? Like what would it take for you to take the vaccine? Like what would it be? And just due to, I guess, the spread of a good amount of misinformation, Keara talked about social media. It's really hard to see what sources you can trust, so that makes it a lot difficult. But a lot of people are really, I guess, in strong opposition of getting vaccinated for the sake of, like she said, someone planting a chip in your arm, or they say the vaccine was produced too fast. There has to be something wrong with it. I've heard that. Just all the things that you will hear. And of course, I don't really have a medical background, so I guess it's not necessarily my responsibility to debunk a lot of that, but I do try my best to, really direct them to the people that you should listen to and away from a Twitter post or something that you saw on Facebook or Instagram.
I think you raised something really, really important for not only Gen Z, but for, I keep saying we old folk, or the seasoned beautiful people who are a little bit older than you. the right places to get information. So you are having one-on-one conversations. You know that some things on social media, I saw you roll your eyes really hard to the right. I hear you. And so where are young people going to learn about vaccines? Like, where are the places that you would consider this one's pretty legit compared to some of the other ones?
To be honest, they're not even taking the time to like get educated about the vaccine. I find it really hard to even encourage people to, hey, check the CDC or, your local health department website just to get the right information. And they're like, nah, I'm not even with it. I'm not even trying to get vaccinated. That's for the birds. I'm not with it.
And a good amount of the information about vaccines that we do see, it's not something that we're going out and looking for. It actually comes to us in the form of your friend might have saw a post somewhere and they reposted it on their story. So whether it's true or not, depending on the type of reach that like people have, because I mean, the networks that we have now, it started with Facebook when we were younger. Wasn't even supposed to be on Facebook with so many friends, but now it's like we're reaching so many people on social media. If myself or Keara were to make a story post now, 1,000 people see it, and who knows how many out of that 1,000 are gonna share it, or how many of that 1,000 are gonna take what they see and just say, instead of looking deeper into it, just take it for surface value and say, you know what, this is gonna inform my decision on something, a very important topic. We seem to allow like one thing that we see kind of inform our entire decision or understanding of it.
To add on to that, a lot of people are more likely to share misinformation, information that they know is not true or don't even seem true, than, information that actually sounds true, correct, likely. They're just like, okay, I can share this, but I can get more shares if I do this instead of sharing the actual information.
I was just going to ask you, why do you think people share the misinformation? But it seems like it's for the likes, for sharing that. Okay.
For the likes, and some people, they genuinely believe that, some of the stuff that they see about the vaccine, they genuinely believe that it's true, which, it speaks to like the availability of information. I feel like before it might have been circumstances where it's hard for you to find any information on anything as important as, a vaccination or, the symptoms or all the related topics to it. But now it's like it's so available that you get to a point where you're overloaded and you don't know, this one's saying that this source is saying this and this source is saying this. So which one am I able to trust?
Mm-hmm. That's helpful. Thank you for sharing that. So there's clearly some information that we're like, okay, that doesn't make sense, or this makes sense, or I can share this, or I couldn't share that, or just people are going to different places to get their information. Those are some of the easier things to talk about. But when it comes to that first question I asked, well, how are you doing? And really asking people, even with all of this misinformation that they're hearing, like, what is your real fear? So I want to ask you that, and then I want to pass it to our psychologist who is versed in PTSD and so many other things. Some of the fears that you are hearing, not only from your military clients or the older clients, but particularly from who I call our babies, from Gen Z. So when they say the vaccine is too new, or a magnet in your arm, or who knows whatever, what is the fear attached to that? So it's a magnet or it's too new, and do you know what the fears are around that?
I personally think the main fear of everyone is just dying. Like I'm a Christian, so I believe in God. So I'm like, okay, if it's my time to go, it's my time to go. He already knows when I'm born, when I'm gonna die. So I just feel like you should trust in yourself, and you should, if you're a Christian or if you're religious, you should trust in who you stand by and believe that, okay, they got my back regardless of what the virus is or what this is or what that is. A vaccine, regardless if I have a vaccine or not, I'm covered, but I'm vaccinated. So
Okay.
For me, in deciding to get the vaccine, I definitely had to battle with that fear on a level, because I'm like hearing all this information. I got it kind of early too, so I'm like, it was when the misinformation was out there a lot louder than the correct information. So I'm like, I'm going to let them poke my arm, but I'm really worried about, all the stuff that I'm hearing. So I think that fear of, being on the wrong side of, whether you're someone that's getting vaccinated and you're like, well, what if the misinformation is right? or even the people on the side of, that are unvaccinated, and they're like, well, I've been listening to a lot of this information about how bad the vaccine is, but what if, I'm wrong and I end up being that person that gets it, and, this is in the third. So I think it kind of has, it's two-sided.
And that it just trying to capture that could stress, nervousness, anxiety, some of the things that we sometimes name and sometimes we don't name. So research has shown us our babies they've been very resilient, and they've navigated this pandemic extremely well. Hybrid learning, in-person learning, virtual learning. Hats off to you. I don't know if our generation could have done that. But research has shown that they are experiencing, he just mentioned some smaller things if we had to qualify them, but thinking about anxiety and depression and some of those things, because you've been in different circumstances for the past 19 months. What are you seeing in your clinic?
Yeah, so many of the things that these young people have just described, I see. One of the major points that I want to bring out is that there has been a lot of campaigning for making sure our elderly get vaccinated. We got to make sure we got to protect our babies. But I've not heard a lot of campaigning for our Gen Z. And so I think we're missing the mark on that. And so there's this hole in which there's a lot of misinformation that is pooling in. And many of the challenges and the misinformation that they're describing is what I'm hearing from my patients. And so how I talk to my patients, interestingly, they all recognize and know that COVID is real. There is no disputing about that. They are fairly aware of the ramifications that can come from if you contract COVID. And so their fears are, what if I get vaccinated and get sick? And what happens if, the vaccine came out too soon? And how do I know that this is going to be in my best interest? And oftentimes I would say, okay, even if you were to get sick, likelihood it will be for a few days. God forbid you get COVID, we have no idea what the long-term effects are going to be, and we do know what COVID can do. And I find that having that kind of frank discussion, like we know what COVID can do, helps people to start to think. Also talking to them about the impact of not only COVID physically, but also mentally, like what we're talking about now, the anxiety, the depression, the lack of control, systems that were once in place that we all understood was kind of washed away, and we're all just trying to figure it out now. And so there is this uncertainty that's happening. Not being able to trust the government in times, not being able to trust information, not being able to even sometimes trust doctors. I've had some patients who have said some doctors discouraged it, other doctors encouraged it. And so you're having a landscape of a variety of modes of information that is coming at people. And so it's a difficult time, especially for our Gen Z.
I'm thinking of a song. I'm probably going to age myself, but there's a song called Ball of Confusion. I'm really aging myself. And what I'm hearing is just there's so much misinformation and disinformation that can be out here regarding how to stay safe, how to be well. And I'm curious to know, and you mentioned the term uncertainty. And so I can see that you start with silver linings. You said it's a great breezy day. Finished my midterms, you found the silver lining. But I'm curious to know, in some of the uncertainty that all three of you have talked about, if you had to just kind of throw out the feelings you had or your peers had when it came to the unknown. Because we started with, we're going to shut down for a few days. A few weeks. The semester. The year. So what have you felt over the course of this pandemic? Clearly, we're nearing the end, which is great news, but tell us some of the things that you have felt or that your peers have felt. You do not have to share your personal information, but what have young people or Gen Z, what are some of the things that they've kind of had to juggle in the midst of being a student, a brother, a sister, maybe a caregiver, SGA president? So walk us through just some of the things that you heard your peers or some of the things that they experienced.
If we go all the way back to March
go
2020, which seems like such a long time ago. And I was literally, I have a journal that I use, and it's like daily. So I was able to look and see exactly what I was thinking during that time. It's like it was one of the early days of spring break, maybe like Monday or Tuesday. They're like, oh yeah, we're gonna extend your spring break a week. So of course, we're running around like, okay, everybody was in Miami, like, oh, we're gonna stay in Miami for a couple more days. I was back home, spending time with my family. So I'm like, Mom, you're not getting rid of me that soon. We got another week. And then of course it ended up getting extended to, indefinitely, and they ended up transitioning to online, which was definitely like an experience that, we would not have guessed. I don't think, some people would have guessed it, but we just didn't see it coming. And then when we think about our last school year, which was,
I was going to tell you to duck, but I didn't want to. Rewind your last 10 seconds.
when we talked about on the blooper reel, but when we talked about last school year when everything went online, we were in a place where, as students living on campus and taking classes online, where we were unsure about whether or not from day to day that we were going to get sent home, because we saw it happen with some of the other schools in our college system. We heard about other students, their school had this amount of many COVID cases, or a cluster here, a cluster there, and they ended up getting sent home. And that fear for, myself being involved in student government, I'm worried about, of course, my peers that maybe don't have such a stable environment at home, or an environment that is conducive to them being able to support themselves academically in the way that they should. Because one thing that we saw, and Keara could probably speak to it as well, we had a good amount of professors that were very, interested and very invested in making sure that students had everything to be successful. But there were instances, sadly, where, some professors treated it as though it were a no more year. And I heard too many stories, more than I should, about, professors not being understanding of the pandemic and, all that people were going through, not only as students, but just as people, human beings outside of the classroom as well. So I think uncertainty is probably the word to sum up the last 2 years. So
I'll say one of the main things, like, everything was good one day, and then like the next day it's just like the whole world did a 360. You see the world change in like a matter of seconds. It seems like it goes from you being out, hanging out, partying, and then stuck in the house, can't even go to a grocery store between certain times. So I think this last 2 years have been definitely something you won't never forget. I was used to the online learning style because I was homeschooled, so I was used to being at home. Instead of me being at home doing my work, I did my work before and went to work. So it was kind of hard, and I wasn't even able to work during the pandemic. I did end up becoming an essential worker, so I did have the opportunity to go to work, to and from. But I just think a lot of people were sad, confused. It was a lot to deal with, and like Derrick said, the professors, some of them just went AWOL with the workload, the misunderstandings, and just not being compassionate for the students. Like, I think they just forgot that we're all human, and we're actually dealing with something that we can't get rid of ourselves. That's just something that we have to figure out how we're going to deal with day by day.
So I'm actually going to come back to you guys and talk about a C word that I'm not completely sure that we talk about in our community, and that is how you coped with all of the changes that you just talked about. Because you're still standing, you're here, and you're vibrant, happy with the weather, got extended spring break, had some really good cooked meals from your mom and told her you're staying. But I would love to hear from our medical professional, our psychologist, who more intimately engages with mental health on the day-to-day, when, as Keara's pointed out, one day things are like this, and it flips into 180, and now it is this. What are some coping strategies that you've been able to offer, young or old, given they've said limited interaction, we're now online, essential worker, worried about your peers, knowing that they don't have the same supports that you do at home? How do we cope, or how should they cope?
Yeah, that's a very good question. So the first thing I typically focus on is validating, because there are a lot of things in the background that people do not acknowledge or recognize. When I think a lot about my patients, transportation, medication. How am I going to? I lost my job. I have a sick baby at home. I lost daycare. For many of the students, I'm struggling in school. I used to be a straight A student, and now I'm failing. Do I change my career choice? Do I think about other things? Do I think about more of essential work and forget about my aspirational career? So there's a variety of different things that happen, and so validating those uncertainties and the flip-flop changes is I think very, very important. I would say that when I started teleworking, I had a little one at home. And so here it is, I'm doing therapy, and I got the little one crying in the background. I got to tell patients, hold on, I got to go ahead and change him, and many of these things. And so what they saw was, oh, well, if Dr. O'Garo is experiencing this, then this is normal for me to experience this. So having them also see that this change is not only impacting you guys, it's impacting everyone, and helping them to rise to that occasion. The other thing, though, is I tell them first you got to check in. You really got to take the moment, stop, and check in not only with your loved ones, but most importantly, check in with yourself. Identify truly how you feel. One of the things that we struggle with, particularly as a Black population, is that we have been unfortunately faced with many, many traumas, whether it be personal or systemic or medical, but there's a number of traumas that we have been exposed to. One of the things that typically happens is numbness. And a lot of Black people don't realize, or anyone who has been exposed to trauma actually, is that can be one of the classic signs of PTSD, is that numbness sensation. Like, I'm just not feeling anything, I'm just avoiding, I'm just pushing myself forward from the next step to the next step. Helping them to understand that numbness is not a good thing, actually. We do need for you to experience some form of emotion, whether it be anger or sadness or fear. It's okay to experience those emotions. If it is anxiety, do some relaxation. Watch a comedy. Try not to get involved with social media or stay long periods of time on the television. I tell them to turn those things off because news, unfortunately, and social media was agitating for many people. Find a friend that makes you laugh. I think that is, being able to have some form of connection. So I was telling patients, do video calls. Don't just do regular phone calls. Get on the phone, see each other. And when we were in that stay at home and everything is shut down, you can't touch. So especially for those who are living by themselves, not being able to have touch really can spiral people mentally and psychologically. It's not unusual for some people to even go as far as experiencing some hallucinations if they haven't been touched for a very, very long time. And so helping people to remember that, okay, do some mindfulness. Imagine what the shirt is feeling like on your back, doing some grounding techniques like, okay, what day is it today? What time is it? Because when you're shut down for so long, you can lose space, you can lose time. Helping people also to remember that depression is something that you're going to have to work through. So unfortunately, we always wait for, when I have a good day, I'll get all this energy to do this, that, and the other. And it's like, no, you got to do all these things even if it's not a good day. And after a while, you will start to feel better. So those are some of the coping mechanisms that I would encourage many of my patients to do. And
it sounds like it starts with saying, I'm not okay. Whether you're checking in with yourself to say, ooh, something's not right. Yeah. Or if your friend asks you, hey, girl, how you doing? Or what's up, bro? Not like, I'm good. It's more so of, today was not the day.
Yes.
And let me share with you why. So it sounds like it starts with kind of ownership, or you said validation and acknowledgement. Yes. Okay. So I was not taught those tools. And I think part of that is just cultural. You can't teach what you don't know. I don't know that my parents know what mindfulness is. They know what dancing is. We love, my self-care is playing drums, ma'am, or dancing, music.
And all of those things are quite important.
That's
Absolutely.
how I move. And fresh
Absolutely.
flowers. And
Yes.
we did a lot of, I don't know if if Gen Z was on Zoom, but we did everything. Cooking, karaoke, Zumba classes, until we got tired of looking at each other, which was probably after about 3 months. And we were like, I'll talk to you on the phone. But this is important for tools for young people to have, because we did not. And I think I can make that general statement. And I don't think my parents' generation or the generation before that had the luxury of knowing these sorts of tools. So what we know, you talked about watching the news and like, getting sort of this trepidation, or like continuing to watch all of the things that were happening with COVID-19. We also know in the news recently that some students just are not doing well on campus. And so that's why I wanted to come back to you and say, you're still here, you're standing, you're shining. I would love to know if you'd like to share. You do not have to share personally, but how are young people coping? How are they making sure that, and I don't know that they have the tools, I just learned them. I learned these tools in grieving a family member. Some of the best counsel I got from my mentor is a Black woman, said everybody needs a paid friend. And I was like, wait, what do you mean? And she meant a therapist, someone who is outside of the situation, who's been trained, who can help you walk through all of your emotions. I didn't have those tools before then. So what we knew was to just say, I'm not doing well today, or let's go dance. Spring break, let's extend it another week. I have dance floors to wipe clean. Do you understand? So curious to know y'all know I'm silly. Curious to know from you on a more serious note, how are the young folks in Gen Z coping? Because some students are really having a difficult time. We see it in the headlines. And some students have found a way to continue, I'm not going to say still standing, but to kind of show a form of resilience, or kind of just fortitude to still show up. So what is the magic that Gen Z has? How are they coping?
I'll say one of the things that makes it easier for us is just each other. One thing I can say about my HBCU is that we're really united. You know, we're just like one big happy family. So we can go to someone we don't even know, like, hey girl, hey, how you doing? And have like a plum conversation. You can walk away and you can feel so much better and still don't even know their name. I think one thing is that we also have to take accountability too for our actions. You know, if we know that we need to stay on top of something, you know, like I'll do it tomorrow or I'll do it the next day, you know, that's not helping us. That's not helping our professors either, because, you know, they don't feel like it should be that type of situation. They feel like you should do it right then, right now, and get it done so you can get it over with. However, I do myself have some issues, like where I see that some of my professors, you know, it's first time back on campus in over a year. So they're like, okay, we got to give them this. We got to catch up on this and that, and make sure they understand this and understand that, because I wasn't able to teach this on Zoom. And it just, sometimes it gets to a point where it's just overwhelming. And I think sometimes everyone just needs to take a step back and, you know, realize what situation we're in right now.
That we're all human. And it sounds like you're counseling patients, but they're watching you as they're being counseled kind of grapple with things. You have a new baby. And so we're all human, and we all have life that continues to happen. So having some sort of, what I think I hear you saying is just compassion. We're all humans.
I'll say that when it comes to the students that have been struggling in the area of mental health, I wouldn't want us to have the narrative to be, you know, them not having them not having, you know, the same resilience as those that have been able to, you know, portray themselves as being able to continue doing things throughout the pandemic. Because, you know, it takes a lot of courage and a lot of resilience to be struggling with all that, you know, a good amount of people go through and still show face and do all the things that they do. And yeah, we see the headlines as well, and it's not a lot of good news. There's a lot more bad than good that we see. But when it comes to, I guess, the ability to cope, you definitely touched on it. It's a lot of, you know, that numbness of just, you know, going through the motions day in and day out, you know, whether, you know, you're just going to class. It used to be just, you know, roll out of the bed, log on virtually, close your computer, do it again the next day. And it was a whole lot of that. And, you know, going back to in person, for me, what allowed me to kind of not continue on the track that I was before the pandemic, because I definitely had a shift and a drop off for a good amount of time with just my productivity and just like me being myself, me being Derrick and who I am. But, I really had to, and I think we all had to do it in some type of way, but just like relearn, life and how the world is. And it was something where, Monday you might make an adjustment and then Tuesday, you don't. It's a different adjustment. I remember, a little bit earlier this year around July, they're like, oh yeah, we're lifting the mask mandates. We're almost out of this. So I'm like, oh yeah, I'll never have to, buy a box of masks again. And I think that lasted about 2 weeks. And then, we went back to wearing the mask indoors and things like that. So I think a lot of it has been, the numbness, which is, it's troubling to hear. And just for me, for a time, that's kind of where I was at. Like, I don't really know what I'm doing. I'm just going to try to do it how I was doing it before the pandemic. And then also Keara touched on it, just the sense of community, which, some people don't have the same access to community, or the same people that are going to say, Derrick, I haven't seen you posting on social media for a couple of days. Like, are you okay? Or, Derrick, I didn't see you at this event. Are you okay? Or, hey, come, when's the last time you watched church online? I know you enjoy going to church in person, but that stopped. Are you able to catch it online? And I think, that's something that has helped, a good amount of us. And kind of to what you were saying, I think in the area of like mental health and all of the resources that are available now, it's much more culturally relevant today than it has been. And, that has kind of been by force, just because, we're looking at everything that's going on and people are saying, this has to stop. And it was us as young people saying, this has to stop. If we're going through the motions of a school year in a way that's different than before, and we're like, we need a mental health day because, we can't do it like how it's been done in the past, whether that's something that a school or a university decides to, adopt, or, we as students, decide to adopt, that's something that would be necessary. But just, I think people have been able to kind of, put themselves first. And that's something that I've been hearing a lot with my peers, like, putting myself first, whether it be with your job, with your schoolwork, with whatever, because, at the end of the day, of all the things that, are temporary or, don't really last, you want to make sure that, you'll always be here. So doing whatever you can to prioritize yourself, your mental health, your physical health, all those areas.
And I want to add on to what Derrick said. Also, being African American, we also have a big struggle with mental health as a whole. We sometimes don't want to take the accountability and actually say, I'm not okay, I'm not myself, I just feel like I need help. Instead, we rather like push it off until we can't push it off any longer, and then we end up bottling up all these feelings and emotions, and then they just all burst and like everything just goes up. And you don't know how to deal with it because it just happens so fast. But I agree, it's hard. It was a hard move to go on campus one day and then be at home the next day, and just it feels like you're doing the repetitive same thing over and over again. So I think it's just something that we had to work on.
So I think what's interesting about what both of you just said is kind of the interplay of culture as people of color, as Black people. About history. We started off this conversation kind of talking about trauma. You mentioned trauma. And I'm curious to know, as someone trained in psychology, well, I'm okay, which I think we have historically thought of as a position of strength. I'm okay. Oh no, I'm good. Or just ignoring it. But now having this kind of raised awareness of that's not it. That's not it. Can you talk more about some of the barriers when it comes to us validating or speaking up or saying when need a break? I understand the world, I understand the earth keeps turning, but the world looks so different now and we need to make adjustments too. So tell us more about how culture plays into that, because we don't ever want to leave that out of the equation. Like we just popped up yesterday and all was fine and well. We have generational trauma. We have parents and grandparents who had to brush it off and keep on moving and really think about the difference between survival and thriving for the livelihood of their families. Tell us more about culture and how that's played the role in, oh, I'm good, I'm okay. and how we can kind of flip that on its head,
Well,
which
I mean,
I think all of you have kind of spoken to.
right. What Keara and Derrick both mentioned is actually very, very important, that with this generation, they're quite progressive. They spent the time to reflect on what previous generations have done, and they're starting to think this may not work. And so the idea of seeking mental health is something that is more widely considered in this generation than in previous generations. As a Black psychologist, that has been, I think, one of the benefits is that having patients come by and say, wait, there's a Black psychologist, I think I can talk to you, and share things that we can discuss, and I don't even have to go in between the lines. You get it. There's a fluidity in what we talk about and understanding those barriers. And so, again, that validation that comes through. But culture does play a role because you're wanting people to understand. I don't have to do too much explanation, or neither my patients. They don't have to do too much explanation when they're saying they're having difficulties at work, or promotions are going past them, or that they're being misunderstood, even by people that love and care for them, that are friends, but might not understand the additional barriers and circumstances that they have to deal with or face with every single day. But on the other side of it, I do have quite a few patients that are like, I'm good, this is fine. I'm just simply here just to get my sessions in so I can get my opiate medication, or that I can get my spinal cord stimulator, and having to acknowledge, and that's fine. So let's talk a little bit about family. Well, this is what's going on. Well, let's talk about how you're doing with the kids. Well, this is going on. You know how it is. Yeah, I know how it is. Maybe I can give you some techniques for that. Really? And then they start to incorporate. And then all of a sudden, there's this trust that has been developed that, oh, you don't know me, but you get me. And before you know it, the majority of my patients who have chronic pain, there is this trauma that comes up. And then we work through that. And quite a few patients have said, if I did not have chronic pain, I would not have come to you. And if I did not come to you, I would not have dealt with something that has been a problem for all my life. I did not know that these coping mechanisms were not the most effective way of dealing with situations. And so I don't know if I answered your question.
You did. I have a follow-up question for you.
Okay.
How do we know we're naming these things? Fear, anxiety, possibly depression, PTSD. How do our bodies show us that we are feeling these things? Because you mentioned numbness at the beginning, right? If you're not out here socializing with your friends, or you're saying, hey girl, you don't even know her name. We both go to Central, Eagle Pride, good to see you. But how do we know? I know for many of my friends, we also had conversations like, my concentration is just off. I can't remember anything. And we're like, well, you getting old, sister, like, right? But really thought it was just rooted in being overwhelmed or stressed or fearful. So what are things that Gen Z can look for? It seems like you have hit the nail on the head. They're very progressive. We need more time on our assignments, and sometimes we're just not getting what we need. And if we need to advocate for a mental health day, we might need to line ourselves up to do exactly that. But I mean, if all you know is waking up and getting on Zoom and going back to bed for the semester, what are things that they should look for as part of that kind of validating and saying like, today just is not the day, and last week wasn't either? How would you know?
Yeah, so a lot of people, when they hear the word depression, the first thing they think about is, but I'm getting up and I'm doing things, so how is it that I'm depressed, especially if I give them that diagnosis? It's the other things. It's my concentration is off. I'm tired all the time. I'm not having the motivation to get the things that I need to get done, things that used to be very easy to me. I'm struggling with getting those things done. Don't want to speak to family, don't want to speak to friends. Actually, I want to sleep in my bed all day. And if you give me a chance, I will do that. Many of those things are good indicators that there might be some depression, or I'm just not sleeping at all. I'm tossing and turning. I fall asleep, and then I wake up within a couple of hours. So those will be good signs. With anxiety, how your body will typically manifest that is a lot of stress, sometimes headaches, because your body is clamping up, especially your neck, and it just manifests into a headache or a migraine. Heart palpitations, having hard time breathing sometimes, feeling uncomfortable being around crowds. For some people, again, the concentration goes out. I get really, really nervous, and I lose my appetite. I prefer to just start to be alone. And then when you look at something like PTSD, it's I avoid anything that reminds me of the trauma. I'm easily irritable, very agitated, don't like anyone behind me, don't like anyone to touch me. Just feeling very uncomfortable with any type of relationship that I feel like you're getting too close, that requires me to trust you. Feelings of insecurity, not only emotionally, but also physically, like always constantly feeling unsafe in the world. And that's the thing about COVID, is that I suspect that when everything starts to, I don't think we'll ever get back to normal. But when we get to a place where we're functioning again, you're going to see this upsurge of lack of security and safety, difficulties trusting social media, or difficulties trusting family members, feeling uncomfortable in your skin, feeling uncomfortable in relationships. And so you're going to find quite a few people that are going to be struggling with that, especially healthcare providers, people who have lost family and friends to COVID, and of course to stay at home for a period of time. And now you're having people come out and you're like, don't hug me, we're still in the middle of COVID, or don't touch me, we're still in the middle of COVID. And having this intense anxiety about going out. What if I get it? And so, all of these different things are going to start to kind of snowball, if not already, as time goes on.
And I think that's real as well. I'll be transparent. If my friends are like, "Oh, let's go eat," do they have a patio? Just the way my nerves are set up, we're not going to be dining indoor for me, for my comfort level right now. But I think
right, and I just want to be able to say that there are some things that are quite appropriate, right? Because again, we're still having breakthrough cases and all of those things. So there are some validation for some anxiety, some concern, and that thin line between when is it no longer productive is the conversation that I'm typically having with my patients.
So we've talked about some heavy stuff, but what we know is that there is a light at the end of the tunnel, and we are nearing the end of this pandemic. And what really impressed me, now I did graduate from the illustrious Florida Agricultural and Mechanical University, HBCU Pride, but I will say walking through Central's campus, I saw so many young people with face masks on, talking to each other with face masks on, to professors with face masks on. And it gave me so much hope, because depending on where you get your information, you might think, oh, I'm outside, I don't need my mask, or we're outside, I can still exchange funky breath with somebody like right across from me. So that was really, really, really enlightening for me. And it was a long, hot walk from my car here. But to see all of the young folks engaging in basic preventive behavior was amazing to me. And you shared some of the places that you get good information and some of the places that you're just like, what? But people will still repost or get their likes. What brings you hope? Because when I walked through your campus, if I had good knees, I probably would have done cartwheels. I was just so excited to see young people. You never know what I'm up to. But what gives you hope? Because we just talked about some really heavy things. People are tired, and they may or may not have family supports, or the teacher may not be supporting them. And Lord, I'm tired of rolling over and getting on Zoom, but the sun is out today. And we took our midterms. And so what else gives you hope as you're navigating the misinformation? You had your own personal reasons for getting vaccinated, and I'm sure you have your own rationale. But what gives you hope when we talk about having clear minds, clear souls, and being able to walk in our brilliance and our excellence when this pandemic is over? Because we do know life is going to look very different. That's without question. But I always say we're going to be all right, and we are the people we've been waiting for. And I see two presidents. I don't know, you might be in the White House for all we know. I'm not claiming things, but I am claiming things. What gives you hope as leaders of NCCU in the midst of this pandemic? What do you want for other students, other folks in Gen Z, when we kick the door open on this pandemic, or kick the door closed on this pandemic?
I think the main thing that gives me hope is, just everyone having that fear of of going home. Nobody wants to be at home right now. They want to be out with their friends. They want to hang out. They want to be able to go to each other's dorm and stay they 6 feet apart and talk to each other and, communicate and love and laugh. And I think that's the main thing, and just the unity of everyone coming together and understanding the fact that, this is real. We do have to take these precautions so that we don't get sick or we don't have to go back home. So I think that's one of the main things that everyone looks at, not having to go back home.
Tell me more about that. They don't want to go home because they want to stay on campus with their friends, or they don't want to go home because they don't know what COVID-19 risk looks like when they go back home with mom or dad or grandma or aunties. I don't know. It's a genuine question. Is it like, I just want to stay on campus and have fun?
Well, I have a few friends that live out of state, so their states are worse than our state. They still have mask mandates. They still can't go out after certain time frames. So I think them being here, and they can have a little bit of leniency and be able to go out to eat with their friends, and walk in a restaurant, have their mask on, and go outside and sit and eat and laugh and talk. I think that's something that they're looking forward to, and being able to sit in class and discuss with their professor face to face instead of over Zoom or WebEx, and being able to go sit in the cafe and eat, or just hang out in general, go to a party. I think those are some of the things that people kind of have the fear for.
I've often said that nothing will replace the power of human connection. And then in the midst of this pandemic, they were like, oh, a 3-second hug shoots up your cortisol levels. And cortisols are your stress hormones, or brings them down. I'm sorry. And I was like, I miss hugs and I need hugs, but I couldn't. But thank you for sharing. Oh, you were about to say something else and then passed it. Oh, go ahead, Derrick.
I was going to say also, for me, hope comes, I guess, just the idea of normalcy. It's a dream that I guess we've all had, but just, coming back this year when we were able to finally be able to be in the caf for the first time, and you're just walking around and you're like, it's not tape over all of the seats anymore. Or even, today's just a normal Wednesday, and we had a good amount of people outside just walking around campus. That's something that just level of normalcy that you kind of like, you're surprised, because when I first greeted one of my professors that I've had for years, just being here, for the first time after having a class online, actually being able to say, hey, like, how are you, in person, that's something that I feel like brings a good amount of hope. And then when we think about, not wanting to go home, it's like everything that you need to be successful, or at least we like to believe it, the reason for a university being of this scale, this large, is so that they have all that housed on campus. If you need a book, you can go to the library, or if you need, we have counseling center. If you need someone to talk to, we really have all of those resources here. So a good amount of, I guess, like, the fear, the issues with going home is like, I don't know if all those resources are going to be within walking distance if I leave here. So, and that kind of has encouraged our students to, act as responsibly as they can. Of course, we're still going out. We still have a good time, but you see people standing outside wearing a mask, or you see people having a conversation, might be grouped up, but it's the same group of people that I've been with for the last 6 or 7 days. So if we have to do anything in the area, contact tracing, it's like, these are the people that I'm with, or I know that I'm with them. And it's a lot. It took a little bit of time for us to get to that, I guess, level of responsibility where we're like, we can't control anything going on outside, but we can definitely, be a part of things getting better. And that's what drove me to get vaccinated, because I'm like, I can't speak to anyone else or whether they're vaccinated or not. But hopefully, in me getting vaccinated, wearing my mask when I can or when I should, I could do my part to make sure, Derrick isn't spreading COVID-19 or doing his best to not do that. And then we could look at friends who other people that get vaccinated, they're doing their part. So as you build that community, you're like, okay, here at NCCU, we have a good amount of people doing their part, and people that, make the decision not to get vaccinated, hopefully they're wearing their masks and they're doing their part in their own type of way. So I definitely think that return to normalcy is like the light at the end of the rainbow that everyone's looking to, and it might not be normal in the way that it has been, but you know, the new normal, which, you know, we got used to saying all last year, but that's kind of like a reality that we're living in.
I want to add on to that. Like Derrick said, the return of the ultimate homecoming experience is something we were all looking forward to. So, you know, the fact that we've got that chance to, you know, return and do what our university does as a family is just something that we all were looking forward to. And the fact that everyone took the necessary precautions, you know, whether they're vaccinated or not vaccinated, you know, they took the precautions of wearing their masks, staying 6 feet apart, you know, social distancing, doing all of those things so that we could get to this point, you know, just shows that we actually care about, you know, what we do as a whole as a university.
That's the comment I was just about to make. I've heard community, whether you said it explicitly or in your comments, like, it's not about you, it's about us. I've heard that from you this entire panel discussion. So much respect to you young people. You guys get a bad rap sometimes. You're like, you're always on your devices. No, they're out here doing their thing all the way up to homecoming. So kudos to you for making decisions, not only for yourself, but for other people, so that you can get to the important things like homecoming. I hear you. What gives you hope as a psychologist, as clearly you're giving people tools to cope as they're navigating misinformation, family support or not, school support or not, all of the things that we've talked about? What brings you hope as we roll into the new normal that so many people have called what we will see when this pandemic ends?
Well, the word that has already been said is resilience. A lot of my patients and people that I've spoken to, there is this sense of resilience and this sense of community, and it's not only about me, but it's about us. And as long as we work together, we will get to where we need to go. And so we've had a difficult 19 months, but there's a lot of people that are coming out of it, I don't want to say actually fine, but stronger.
And better. I'm so glad that you kind of checked me or on what resilience means, because resilience also means you own a little piece of vulnerability in that as well. So we can even redefine what strengths means. It means that we showed up. We weren't crawling on our knees. And even if we were, we made it.
That's right. That's right.
Thank you all for this amazing panel discussion. Gen Z and Jen, we're not going to say who we are, but thank you so much for sharing your experience with us, because we, as she stated, we haven't heard a lot from Gen Z, and it's not because you're not speaking, just we are not having a forum as Black Wall Street and Complex Creative and Duke Health has afforded for the VibeCheck today. So thank you for telling us how you are doing when we checked in at the beginning. So we have run out of time. I could sit out here in this fall weather all day, but we got to wrap up. And so thank you for sharing your perspectives, not only about all of the things you had to juggle as students, but some of the misinformation around COVID-19 and vaccines and infection. And thank you for showing us what mental health can look like and how to kind of keep our eye on when we're not doing well and when we are doing well, and checking in with each other. So our partners have collaborated to do this vibe check for an open, frank discussion, and we hope that you will continue the conversation in the next segment. Thank you to Duke Health, to Black Wall Street, and Complex Creative for this opportunity. I'm Dr. Bahby Banks with Pilar Consulting, and I'm excited for this opportunity. Thanks so much. God bless and good night.